Thank you very much, Simon. And I would like to thank everyone who's joined. I know that we have a large number of people on the presentation, and they span across Australia, Asia, and also into the United States. So good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the Paradigm presentation. Simon, next slide, please. Our standard disclaimer applies. Obviously, this is a presentation with forward-looking statements, so we obviously have to highlight this to all potential investors. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the key highlights from the day 365 data. Now, before I get into going through the highlights of this data, I would like to just go back and have a quick look at the 008 phase 2 clinical study. So just to remind everyone, in October 2022, we reported on the day 365 results. April 23, we reported on the day 168 results. And so today we're reporting on October 2023, we're now reporting on the day 365 data. Now, all of this data comes together with a huge effort from people within Paradigm and also our external consultants and also our contractors. So I would like to acknowledge the very fine effort of the people at Paradigm in our R&D department, our regulatory department, our communications department, clinical and business development, as well as our strategic partners such as IAG and Aspire, who've helped us significantly with the interpretation of the MRI data that will be released later this week or early next week. I would also like to remind everyone, in terms of the amount of data that is being presented today, this is also a significant effort because the company has also undertaken additional studies throughout this calendar year 2023. We did report earlier in the year a very successful canine study, which has been accepted by the American Rheumatology Society for presentation next month. We also presented that we completed an MPS 1 phase 2 study, and all of those patients have finished their treatment and they all remain on the therapy post that clinical trial. We're also going to be releasing in November or December the top-line results from our second MPS study, that's MPS 6, being run in Brazil, and that will be a very important study because that will be a rare double-blind placebo-controlled phase 2 study in a rare disease. And we also have the MRI data, the quantitative MRI data being announced, as I just mentioned, sometime later this week, early next week. So let's get on to the presentation for today. I'm going to go through a highlight, and then I have great pleasure in passing on to my colleague, Dr. Donna Skerrett, who's going to take you through the actual data. We're then going to have a discussion around the business opportunity. And then, as Simon said, we'll open it up for live questions. And this is really your opportunity. If there's anything in the announcement that you have a question, please submit it as we're going through the presentation. So the key highlights from the day 365 data. This is now the first controlled study with subcutaneous iPPS following subjects out to 12 months following one course, 6-week course of iPPS treatment. The 6-week iPPS treatment course demonstrated significant improvements in pain, function, and overall WOMAC measures compared to placebo at day 365. Now, importantly, no other OA drug has shown significant pain reduction and functional improvements at 12 months after a single course of treatment. Now, I think that's really key in terms of understanding the opportunity that we have here. iPPS could become an early therapy in the OA treatment algorithm with the potential to reduce reliance on other OA therapies demonstrated through reduction in the rescue medications such as use of paracetamol, NSAIDs, etc. Now, based on these data, Paradigm intends to proceed with a provisional approval application to the TGA, and I'll explain some of those steps a little later in the presentation. But we are now so encouraged with these data, we believe we have all that's necessary to go through and complete our provisional application with the TGA. This phase 2 study was performed concurrently with the company's ongoing phase 3 study. So we're talking about the day 365 results from a phase 2 study, and also we will give an update on some developments in our phase 3 clinical trial. So next slide, please. So now I have great pleasure in handing over to my colleague, Dr. Donna Skerrett, who leads our clinical programs, and she will take you through the top-line results of Para-008, day 365 results. Excuse me, Donna, I'm not sure if it's just me or the rest of the webinar.
Thanks.
Oh, I couldn't hear you.
Yes, I was just unmuted. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks so much, Paul. So I'd like to start by giving you a recap around the Para-008 study. We designed this study to explore the durable effects of PPS on pain, function, and OAD disease progression. And as you may recall from earlier presentations, we assessed biomarkers looking at changes from baseline in multiple objective measures associated with disease progression of OA. We did that by looking at synovial fluid biomarker, serum, and urine in PPS-treated patients and compared their findings to controls. 61 patients participated in the study. They received once or twice weekly PPS or placebo, and the follow-up period is out to 12 months. Now, previously, we have reported the outstanding top-line results. Our primary endpoint was achieved. That was at day 56. That endpoint was to identify a change in one or more synovial fluid biomarkers associated with arthritic disease progression at day 56. And as you'll recall, we reported out, we identified several biomarkers, those involved in pain mechanisms, cartilage degradation mechanisms, as well as inflammation. So we identified several biomarkers early on and then subsequently in the study to help us understand mechanisms of action of PPS and OA, and also get an idea on what the effects of PPS were on disease progression. At day 56, we also reported to you significant clinical results, so pain, function, and stiffness, and the overall WOMAC scores for the twice-weekly PPS group were very much improved compared to the placebo arm. We then looked at day 168 at MRI results, and we previously have reported out to you semi-quantitative MRI analysis. The day 168 analysis showed that we had reduction in cartilage loss, indicating cartilage preservation, reduction in bone marrow lesions, and reduction in osteophyte formation in PPS-treated patients compared to controls. So previously, we've seen biomarker responses, clinical responses, as well as promising changes in structural improvement in PPS-treated patients. If I can go to the next slide, please. Now at day 365, the results we are reporting are that a single 6-week course of PPS given as 2 milligrams per kg twice weekly showed the following findings compared to placebo. We saw significant reductions from baseline in WOMAC pain, significant improvement from baseline in WOMAC function, durable improvements in WOMAC stiffness, and significant improvement in the overall WOMAC scores. So these combined are very important in that we previously looked at day 56. We then saw clinical and structural changes at day 168. And now all the way out to a year following the single 6-week course of treatment, we're seeing separation of the curves with improvement being sustained in PPS patients who were treated with the drug twice weekly for the duration of 6 weeks. We also looked at PGIC at day 65 following iPPS, and that was statistically significant compared to placebo. So this is a patient global impression of change. It's a measure of patients telling us how their life overall has changed following their exposure to the drug. We also measure rescue medication. So in addition to receiving PPS, patients might need additional therapy, and we keep very rigorous diaries of how much treatment that they use. And here we see that the rescue medication use was 5 times lower in the twice-weekly PPS group compared to placebo. So we're seeing here durable pain, durable response with PGIC, and significantly reduced rescue medication in the twice-weekly arm compared to placebo. So next, I'd like to go through some of these results in more detail. So as you know, this study evaluated once weekly versus twice weekly dosing. You've heard me talk a lot about the twice weekly responses. Clearly, the twice weekly arm has outperformed the once weekly arm and placebo in this study. We first observed that at day 56 when we presented the top line data to you. We then saw the data again at day 168 and saw that the once weekly arm at that point still wasn't performing as well as the twice weekly arm. So out of this observation, we are very aware that our phase 3 Para-002 study has a dose finding arm in stage 1, which has once weekly arms being investigated. So the phase 3 program, which is an adaptive design, was evaluating 2 once weekly arms and 1 twice weekly arm at a dose that was lower than 2 milligrams per kg twice weekly. So given that observation, Paradigm requested our data monitoring committee to undertake an interim analysis of the dosing arms in the phase 3 stage 1 portion based on the once weekly performance in Para-008. So what we're saying is that we observed that once weekly was not performing well in Para-008, and we wanted to understand where the once weekly arms performing in the phase 3 program. And the findings from that review by the DMC are that the stage 1 dosing performance does not reflect the efficacy of Paradigm's previous phase 2 studies, 005, which you've heard about previously, and this study, 008, where you're hearing about results all the way out to day 365, where twice weekly is outperforming placebo as well as once weekly arm. So with this information, we are now aware that we have doses in our phase 3 program that do not perform as well as the twice weekly dosing arm. And we've made a corporate decision that our OA program will now focus on achieving the results seen in this 2 milligram per kg twice weekly regimen in our phase 3 program going forward. So just to recap that, we have prior experience with 2 milligrams per kg twice weekly in this study, in a prior phase 2 study, Para-005, as well as the SAS Access Special Access Scheme program, which has treated hundreds of patients. So out of this aggregate data group that we have, we understand at this point that the 2 milligram per kg twice weekly regimen is outperforming the other dosing regimens. Next slide, please. What does this performance look like? So in Para-008 at day 365, we see that the twice weekly arm has shown significant improvement at day 56 as well as day 365 compared to placebo. iPPS also demonstrated clinically meaningful responses to pain. And we assess that by looking at the proportion of patients who've achieved at least 30% improvement in pain from baseline. And in the twice weekly group, 54.5% achieved at least 30% improvement at day 365 compared to 33% in the placebo arm. Next slide, please. When we look at WOMAC function from baseline, we see significant improvements in function at day 56 as well as day 365, again in the twice weekly group compared to placebo. Also, we see that this treatment demonstrated clinically meaningful responses to WOMAC function. And that, again, that's by assessing what proportion of patients have reached at least 30% improvement over since baseline. And here we're seeing that 55% of patients receiving the twice weekly dose have reported over 50% improvement at 365 days, and that's compared to 28% in placebo. So not only are we seeing the numerical responses in terms of the change from baseline and WOMAC scores, but also the proportion of patients achieving clinically meaningful responses remains very high at 1 year after the initial treatment. Next slide, please. The patient global impression of change is a self-reported measure that reflects the patient's overall experience with the treatment course. And it's very valuable for evaluating the effectiveness of a treatment beyond the more objective clinical measures used in clinical trials. The average day 365 PGIC score was highly statistically significant for the twice weekly group compared to the placebo arm. You're seeing in this graph that we have improvement over placebo at day 56, day 168, and day 365, reaching a highly significant value at day 365. So now we're talking about a year out to treatment, improvement in pain, improvement in function, and improvement in PGIC. And this means that the patients are telling us that they are experiencing either stabilization or overall improvement in their OA disease since starting the treatment course. Next slide, please. So I've also mentioned the use of rescue medication. This is something that was monitored very closely in the Para-008 study. We've previously reported out on this at prior timelines. At 365 days, we now have the quantitation of rescue medication used. This is a very objective and quantifiable measure of a patient's pain relief needs, and it's important to determine how much additional pain relief patients require beyond the trial treatment. The placebo arm's cumulative use of paracetamol remained over 5 times higher at day 365 compared to the twice weekly PPS group. So in other words, they were reaching for paracetamol 5 times as likely as PPS group, and the use in the PPS group actually remained quite low. Why is this important to us? It's important to know that additional pain medication isn't in any way influencing the responses that we're seeing. And so regulatory authorities often consider rescue medication use when evaluating the efficacy of a new pain treatment. So we want to know, is this treatment effective in the absence of additional pain therapy being used? And we can certainly see from these data that they're showing us that these pain responses in the twice weekly group are not associated with additional rescue medication use, and that without the treatment of PPS, patients are using fairly large amounts of paracetamol for pain control. Next slide. So I'd like to end there and turn back to Mr. Paul Rennie to discuss more in terms of the options available to us after reviewing these outstanding data and some programmatic decisions moving forward. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Donna. It was very well presented and very clear that the twice a week administration of PPS has really shown tremendous durability in pain and function and PGIC out to day 365 after a 6-week course of the drug. So very, very exciting, because obviously we then have to consider how that opportunity fits within the market of osteoarthritis. I won't labor this slide because I think all participants know that osteoarthritis is a major market. It's got blockbuster potential. We know that by 2030, 120 million plus people will have clinically diagnosed osteoarthritis. That's in the markets of the US, EU5, Canada, and Australia. We know that also on the right-hand side, you'll see a high proportion of people are largely dissatisfied with their current medications, because we know that the disease starts to outperform or progress past the efficacy of available medications. So we'll see that in the next slide, please, Simon. Thank you. This informatic tries to show quite clearly that if we look across the x-axis at the bottom, you'll see KL grade 1, KL grade 2, KL grade 3, KL grade 4. These are radiographic measures of the status of the osteoarthritis disease. And obviously it starts at KL grade 0, moving through to KL grade 4, which is the very severe form of osteoarthritis. And as you can see in the bar graphs above, you'll see that the common medications used in the early stage, KL grade 1, analgesics, NSAIDs, and corticosteroids. So these drugs are largely effective in KL grade 1 osteoarthritis. But as we move into the more severe forms of osteoarthritis, those medications, as indicated by the change to the red bar, are largely ineffective as the disease progresses into Kellgren-Lawrence grade 2, 3, and 4. Kellgren-Lawrence grade 3 and 4 is considered moderate to severe osteoarthritis, and that is where the biggest market opportunity exists, because you'll also see in the bar below the NSAIDs and analgesics, there's opioids which are generally not used in early stage osteoarthritis, but when the pain becomes more consistent and more severe, some practitioners reach for opioids to try and deal with the pain that their patients are experiencing. But as you can see, they also have a really relatively limited utility, because when we get to Kellgren-Lawrence grade 3, opioids are largely ineffective. So despite the obvious concerns of the use of opioids over a longer period of time, they're also largely ineffective when people get to Kellgren-Lawrence 3 and 4. And that is why that many participants, as the disease progresses, are largely dissatisfied with their drugs. The disease has progressed beyond the capability of the medication. We also know that there therefore presents an opportunity for some alternative medications, such as platelet-rich plasma, stem cells, viscosupplementation, and orthokine. But it's important to note that in Australia, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners holds a strong against recommendation on these medications, because they are largely unproven in randomized placebo-controlled studies. That the data on those medications is yet to be very conclusive. So therefore, that opens the door or the opportunity for iPPS, which has demonstrated across Kellgren-Lawrence grade 2 through to Kellgren-Lawrence 4, very good symptomatic relief in terms of pain and functional improvement for people with moderate to severe osteoarthritis. And I hope that investors can see that this is a significant unmet medical need. When you look at the orange bar with the experimental procedures, opioids and analgesics and NSAIDs, that there is largely no competition in that space. There's very few physicians who would say that in moderate to severe osteoarthritis, there is a plethora of treatment options available. There are very, very few, if any, that are really successful. And what we're very excited about is that we can see that taking patients in that moderate to severe osteoarthritis or Kellgren-Lawrence 3 and 4, which I just mention that both Para-008 and our phase 3 clinical study have focused the inclusion criteria on people with moderate to severe osteoarthritis, Kellgren grade Lawrence 3 and 4. So this is the gap in the market, and this is what we have shown, that a single treatment of iPPS in the moderate to severe osteoarthritis patients, there is a durable effect out to 12 months in terms of pain relief and functional improvement. And that, I think, is an answer for this segment of the market that will be welcomed by physicians and patients alike, that will be able to demonstrate and have demonstrated in our phase 2 study. This cohort of subjects is well treated with the PPS product and showing very durable outcomes. And that's what we're so excited about, because not only is it good to show that the drug works in this group of patients, but it's also good to know that patients can get that long-term relief, which they're looking for, because patients at this stage of Kellgren grade 3 and Kellgren grade 4 generally got very severe symptoms, and those severe symptoms are consistent and persistent. So in other words, that means the pain is often present during weight-bearing movements, such as walking or climbing up and going up and down stairs, but it's also consistent and persistent when not weight-bearing, such as when people are trying to get a good night's sleep. The pain is very consistent and persistent, and we've shown that with our drug in this cohort of subjects, very good pain relief, very good functional improvement, reduction in stiffness, very good PGIC outcomes, and we're very excited because we're addressing a hole in the market that is massive, that eventually all subjects, if they live long enough, will eventually move from Kellgren Lawrence 1 through 2, through 3, through 4, and therefore are potential users of this drug. Next slide, please. Thanks, Simon. Now, credit has to go to Dr. Rachel Peat, who works at Paradigm. She has put together an informatic here to really try and elucidate that opportunity in the market. So this is looking at current therapies, such as paracetamol and NSAIDs, and you'll see a quote from Dr. Bloom, who was an investigator on the Para-008 study. You'll see that he mentions the regular use of paracetamol and NSAIDs in early stage osteoarthritis. But as you can see on the right-hand side, that these drugs are taken daily and their effect lasts for 1 day or less. So these are really limited in their capacity, and I think most physicians will recognize chronic use of paracetamol and NSAIDs is not ideal, and often package inserts will often warn about the long-term use of this class of drugs. Opioids, we also know, has a pain-reducing effect, but its effect lasts for 1 day or less. So again, we can see that the durability of these drugs is limited, and they have to be taken regularly. Corticosteroids, we can see from this nice informatic that the peak response is generally at 2 to 6 weeks, with no effect after 13 to 26 weeks. So corticosteroids, again, are limited in their application. Several reports from the US Radiology Society indicate that intra-articular corticosteroid injections with a follow-up examination in 12 months or 2 years often is associated with more rapid cartilage breakdown than people who haven't received corticosteroids. So there is a short-term effect. Long-term effect is largely, I think, unknown and is still being investigated. Hyaluronic acid, also most of this data is anecdotal. Very few properly controlled studies around the use of hyaluronic acid. But having said that, the studies that are out there do show a peak response in the window of 5 to 13 weeks, minimal effect at 26 weeks. And then we have PPS at the bottom. As you can see, 12 injections, and that effect peak at day 56 and then continues out to day 365. So this really is an excellent, and thank you, Dr. Pete, for the chart, but it's an excellent way of representing to investors the opportunity that we have here at Paradigm. I hope you can see from this that really there is a large number of people who are dissatisfied with short-acting medications. Corticosteroids, again, have some issues. Hyaluronic acid, not sure what happened there. I think so. Hyaluronic acid, limited. But the important thing here is that in some markets, such as the market in China, and my colleague Beverly Hutman will be able to talk more about this, but hyaluronic acid is used extensively in the Chinese market for treatment of osteoarthritis. The pharmaceutical companies in China are looking for more durable effect, and therefore these data that we're presenting today will be a key catalyst for our discussions with the pharma companies in China, because they want more duration of effect. And secondly, a lot of the Chinese companies want to know that there is structural improvement with the use of the drug, as opposed to just getting good pain relief. They also want to see some changes in the MRIs of patients as they go throughout this 12-month period. So we'll be releasing shortly the 6-month follow-up. And I should say that most of the experts said that 6 months is far too soon for any drug to show any structural improvement on MRI. And I think we're about to surprise the market, showing our MRI results when they become available in the next week or two. But these data, I think, are important because they will also make our job of partnering with this particular drug even more successful, because we'll be able to show this informatic and also explain with the data we are seeing a peak effect, but it is very durable out for 12 months. So thanks, Dr. Pete, and I hope investors can see that we have a real opportunity on our hands here. Next slide, please. Okay, as I've mentioned a few times, with these data, we're also very encouraged to now be able to inform the market that we believe we have all of the information available to proceed on with a provisional approval application with the TGA following a Para 008 iPPS 12-month duration of effect. We will confirm to the market when those dates are locked, but I will mention a little bit later some of the indicative times, but those indicative times are purely indicative until we've had our meetings with the TGA. Now, just to fill the gap in everyone's knowledge with regards to the TGA offer a provisional approval, which gives the sponsor the opportunity to market the drug. You do get an ARTG number, which means it is on the Therapeutic Goods Register. It can be marketed and sold within the Australian market. Now, that provisional approval is based on phase 2 data, and our early discussions with the TGA said that they were very surprised and very encouraged with our data. However, when we got to the issue of durability, they asked the question, how durable is this effect? And we said that we had, from our several hundred SAS cases at that time, we had somewhere between 12 and 24 months reported durability. And the TGA said at the time, well, that's outstanding, but they would like to see controlled data. So we now have the controlled data to be able to answer that question for the TGA, that yes, we do have significant pain reduction, we have functional improvement, we also have structural changes, improvement, etc. That separates our drug apart from every other drug, but we also have this durability now, which we can answer conclusively with this phase 2 data. So I'll mention later some of the, as I say, indicative timelines for provisional approval. Also, next steps, we have the full quantitative analysis of the Para 008 6-month MRI data which will be reported in the next week or two. And we're also currently, our communications team is working overtime, preparing a manuscript for peer review and publication. I think the academic and commercial world will be very, very excited with this outcome. It's a common question that we get from many of our potential partners. What is the duration of effect? We have answered that with anecdotal evidence from the special access scheme. But we have also informed those partners that we are doing a controlled study, and they are waiting basically for today's announcement to say that, yes, the durability has been confirmed in a randomized placebo-controlled study out to 12 months. So again, partnering discussions will definitely benefit off the back of these data. And of course, having it peer-reviewed will give validation to the data as well. Next slide. So near-term news flow. Para-002 clinical trial recruitment completed. Stage 1 of phase 3 clinical trial is completed, but as Dr. Skerrett outlined, we have given the feedback from the once-a-week dose in Para-008, sought an interim analysis from our data monitoring committee, and we will now be working with them and the regulatory agencies to ensure that we can get the 2 milligram per kilogram twice a week into our phase 3 program, and we'll update the market once we have those details. We have now reported on the 12-month clinical outcome data with today's webinar and today's announcement. Outstanding is the Para-008 clinical trial 6-month quantitative MRI data. Again, what to look for will be effects of the drug on bone marrow edema lesions, the synovium and synovitis, also cartilage thickness and cartilage volume, and those data will be coming out in the coming weeks. Again, we do intend to have a D-mode pathway discussion with regulatory authorities in Q1 calendar year 2024. That D-mode pathway is particularly important for Chinese pharmaceutical companies. Again, we can talk about that later if required. The MPS 6 phase 2 clinical study top-line results will be December this year. We're great anticipation because that is a placebo-controlled, double-blind, rare disease clinical study. A lot of expectation around that. And again, that study is intended to really ramp up our potential for partnering the MPS program. That is very exciting opportunity for us. We have announced previously that we do intend to announce our dose selection Q1 or at the end of Q1 calendar year 2024. We'll update the market as our discussions with the agencies clarify how we're going to get the 2 milligram per kilogram twice a week into our phase 3 program. Also, as I've mentioned at the outset, MPS 1 and Para-008 clinical data sets are currently being prepared for peer-reviewed publication. We hope that they'll be sent out to the various journals for peer review this calendar year, but publication will probably be in calendar year 2024. And as we've mentioned many times, Paradigm is currently in active discussions with potential regional partners for its phase 2 asset in MPS and also our phase 3 asset in osteoarthritis. And we have discussed and mentioned many times potential deal in China. It's through no lack of effort on our part. We're finding that more and more about the Chinese market as we develop into that program. We're working with an excellent partner in the region, and we are very, very confident that these data today, once seen by the Chinese companies, will be a significant catalyst to hopefully bring a deal home in the near future.